Hello, Mr. Ramesh. Can you hear
Good
us?
morning. Yes, yes. Good
Yes.
morning. Good morning. Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks. Thanks. I'm sorry. There was some problem in joining up, and thanks.
Yes, we are all learning together. So,
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me as well, and good to see all of you here.
Anna, why don't you go on with the introductions? I'll just try calling GRK.
Sure. Dr. Ramesh, I'm Anna. I also work with the News Minute. I'm a deputy news editor. So hoping for a good discussion on managing the pandemic. Thanks for taking time out during this hectic time. I can't imagine that, sort of managing this and your duties is obviously really challenging. Mr. Radhakrishnan,
I think his video has just gone off for a second. He'll be back with us in a minute.
so for the participants who have joined, they can send their questions. There is a Q&A at the bottom, and we're taking some questions live, and we will also try and take some questions from the Q&A board on Zoom during this discussion.
Okay, I think Mr. J. Radhakrishnan is back. So let's look at what the situation is in both the states now. See, Andhra Pradesh normally gives the latest numbers only around 11 or 12 o'clock. So these are the numbers from yesterday. Tamil Nadu has crossed 78,000 of coronavirus cases, and Andhra Pradesh has crossed 12,000 cases. Mr. J. Radhakrishnan, can you hear me? Can you hear me, sir? Okay, I think we'll have to sort out that. Mr. Ramesh, coming to you, the
Yes.
numbers are steadily going up.
Right.
We see those concentrated in certain districts. Um, in Andhra, do you believe the numbers are plateauing now, or will we see these kind of numbers every day for at least a few more weeks?
Uh, First of all, good morning to everyone, and thank you for having me. Of course, I mean, the numbers have been going up as expected, not just in Andhra Pradesh, but across the country. And that is something that was expected following lifting of the lockdown. What is important is not so much numbers. Actually, the media, I believe, is obsessed with the numbers. I mean, numbers in terms of the testing, in terms of the positivities, and then in terms of deaths. I mean, these numbers are important, but at the same time, we need to place this in a perspective because, I mean, once the lockdown is lifted, people have come to believe. I mean, at least that's my sense, particularly in the urban areas, that we have to learn to live with the virus. I mean, learn to live with the virus is not living with a pet. It is actually you have to change your ways of the way that you conduct yourself, way you behave, the entire social dynamics and the behavioral dynamics have to change, and not as an individual and as a society. Now, I think that is happening very slowly, particularly in the urban areas. I get a sense that the rural areas, people are a lot more circumspect. The second thing that has happened is we have had a sizable number of people who have come back from other states. I mean, who had gone out for employment and who returned back, both from overseas as well as from the other states. I mean, those, of course, are again a source of infection. And though we are isolating them, I think we are one of those states, those who are testing them on arrival and then quarantining and then tracing the contacts if they are tested positive, and also tracking their movement and also their contacts. So in that sense, we are little better prepared. But however, we need to recognize also the fact that the urban areas have slums where people huddle together, live in small spaces, and necessarily, I mean, there is a higher potential there for spread of infection. The third reality we need to recognize also is that in India, in general, and also in Andhra Pradesh in particular, where studies have indicated that the non-communicable diseases, which people now popularly call comorbidities, particularly hypertension, diabetes, are fairly, there is a high degree of prevalence. And this also starts in younger age group. So, I mean, these people are much more vulnerable to both to catch the infection as well as to gravitate to a much higher degree of severity of the infection. So, I mean, I'm not really, very worried as long as, I mean, important thing is not the numbers. The important thing is having the capacity, capability to manage those numbers. Now, what is likely to happen in India and even in my state or any state for that matter is because the minute you start questioning why is the numbers going up, the first response is to under report the numbers. So the minute you under-report the numbers, you are in serious trouble because then you do not know what really is going on. Your strategy goes haywire, and your action plan really becomes ineffective. So effectiveness is what is important rather than the effort. I mean, I've consistently been saying that the pandemic is not like managing an epidemic. Now, we are used to in the civil administration and also in the system, both as the doctors, the civil servants, and the politicians are generally prepared to manage cases which are, a small epidemics or which is localized, which has a beginning point and an end point. And also, you can then mobilize the resources effectively. This happens with the natural calamities. But I think we need to first recognize the fact that this pandemic is going to be with us for a long time. I mean, this is a long, protracted effort that is required. I mean, at least a year, perhaps longer. I mean, that's from all indications.
I'll just interrupt you with that sober note that this may take a year. Anna, would you like to ask JRK about the numbers?
Yeah, so Mr. Radhakrishnan, Tamil Nadu has crossed 78,000 cases as of yesterday. A bulk of that is in Chennai. There are about 50,000 cases so far in Chennai. I mean, not active cases, the total cases. Do you believe that Tamil Nadu or Chennai has reached its peak?
See, I hope I'm audible now.
Yes.
See, actually, we have a peculiarity where Chennai had started peaking earlier. I personally, in a disaster, it's too early in this kind of biological disaster to predict that we have reached a peak or we have stabilized it. Our focus now has been that, in Chennai and the neighboring districts, if you look at the numbers, Chennai, Tiruvallur, Kanchipuram, Chengalpattu, which are all adjacent, we have huge urban population and where the disease got in first, actually the initial entry came. So we feel that, since we have been doing very intensive micro level planning of the containment areas, probably we will be able to initially push the doubling time for a longer duration. Then probably it will start coming down. It will be too early to predict, but as a bureaucrat and as a field person dealing with all the doctors in the health department, we feel that probably since the discharge rate is almost matching, if not equal to the new cases, we will be able to manage the crisis till we are able to get the downward trend. Our focus is now also parallelly onto other areas like Madurai, Tiruvannamalai, Kadalur and Ramanathapuram, where compared to Chennai, the numbers may be far less, but they could be potential areas where if we don't take all the steps which we took at Chennai, we could see a greater increase. That is why our main strategy last 1 week to 10 days has been that, not worry about the testing numbers, which has been ramped up almost 3 times, both in Chennai and also in the state, and we consistently do about 32,000 PCR. That also throws up larger numbers of people, but ultimately it will help catch people early so that we can address the case fatality, which is also a matter of concern. Though we have one of the lowest case fatality, still it is a number which is which we can't just be dealing it as a statistics.
Okay, so Mr. Radhakrishnan, I'll ask you a question from your answer itself, and then Anna will also want to ask perhaps to PV Ramesh about the public health system in Andhra. So you were saying that the concern now is not just Chennai, but that the disease is spreading in smaller numbers, but to other districts also. We are as journalists, we hear too many people coming forward and saying that they are either not getting beds in private hospitals, in public hospitals, though the government says there are enough numbers. For example, I can see a question from Mr. Vijay, who says that he himself faced a situation where hospitals denied admissions and ambulance did not come. So even in Chennai, if we are facing this situation, which has a bulk of Tamil Nadu's hospital, first, how are you dealing with Chennai and all these people, everyone complaining that hospitals are not taking? And second, what happens when it goes to districts where you have lesser number of hospitals, beds, ventilators, etc.?
See, one is that, this initial lockdown period has allowed us to ramp the numbers. Second is we have changed an approach that earlier, 20 to 25% beds only used to be reserved for COVID and non-COVID. If you remove casualty, if you remove emergencies, if you remove deliveries, and if you remove specific specialized treatment like cancer and focused treatment, the non-COVID bed occupancy used to be in the range of 15 to 20%. If I take an example of GH, out of 3,000 beds, COVID initially was allotted for 40. So as an immediate measure, what we have done is we have ramped up all the at least 30 to 40 non-COVID beds we have brought into the COVID stream. Second is, again, I think my senior colleague from Andhra Pradesh is also there. We just can't be looking at beds. We have to look at how many isolation, how many intensive care units, how many beds with ventilator, how many beds. No, though they say ventilator is not the very critical, requirement. High flow nasal cannula is a more needed thing. How many beds supported with oxygen? How many normal beds? So that way we have ramped up, and in Tamil Nadu roughly we have around 75,000 beds. Of course, these need to be classified into beds with oxygen, without oxygen. Second problem with private sector, I openly admit that, there is a excess number of beds in certain hospitals. We have almost 187 hospitals which have registered. But people want to go to 3 to 4 major private hospitals. And like somebody has pointed out in this large exercise, definitely there is likely to be a difference between what we claim and what is there in the field, because there may be individual hospitals not agreeing to what they have shared in the public domain. So we have created this 104 number where we have said that we will parallelly reconfirm whether a hospital has denied admission, actually doesn't have bed, means okay, then we will offer him neighboring hospitals where it can be done. As far as ambulance is concerned, because of the increasing number, we do have felt the need to increase ambulances. So we have actually increased almost 120 ambulances to Chennai. Districts, actually, the numbers are 200 or low, out of which if you remove home quarantine, a lot of people actually talk about absolute number. Even now what happens is on a daily basis, if we, I think yesterday we reported around 3,600 odd. Around 40 to 45%, if they go to a screening center and they are asymptomatic, they prefer to go for home quarantine if they have an individual toilet and individual room. Then, if you are very severe only, they need to occupy the hospital. So that information we are giving that, everybody, if he is a positive, he need not rush to the hospital directly. Of course, we have also realized that, that is easier said than done. So there should be a triage place even in the hospitals where people walk in. People who immediately need to be treated are shifted to a hospital, to the center, but those who need to be shifted to a COVID care center or a COVID health center, which is a lesser facility, that also is encouraged. So roughly 25 to 30% go to hospital, another 30%, 30 to 40% go to COVID care centers. Balance 40 only need, they go back to home quarantine. This has to be, publicized, and also the help center has to be a little bit more active. Point is well taken, we'll try to address it.
Okay, Anna?
Yeah, Dr. Ramesh, Andhra's public health system isn't as robust as Tamil Nadu or Kerala's. So what is your strategy as far as patient management goes, when Andhra reaches its peak?
Okay, let me summarize what's really happened. It is a fact that Andhra public health system had not been as robust or as effective as Tamil Nadu or Kerala. But in the last 1 year, a lot of efforts have been made. Actually, the main focus of our Chief Minister has been on health and education, how to build healthcare from bottom up. So the two important things that have happened, one of course is to set up a village and ward secretariat in which there is an A&M. So virtually the number of auxiliary nurse midwives available at the village level have doubled. In the sense we used to have 7,000 and odd sub-centers. Now effectively there are 12,000 and odd sub-centers. So which basically means that there is an A&M at every level. Then we've also trained the ASHA workers, enhanced their salary. Actually, their salary we increased from 3,000 to 10,000 rupees, which is basically an incentive. And then we have a system called village volunteer system. There's a village volunteer for every 50 households who's actually supposed to provide these services. Now, this has given us a much better anchor in terms of the surveillance at the local level, either at the urban areas or the rural areas. In terms of the referral system, we have set up 3 toll-free numbers, 104, 1902, 14410, which anyone can call at the appearance of the earliest symptoms. So there is an effective surveillance in a way almost on a day-to-day basis. Then those who are self-reporting or reporting of their neighbors on any problems that they need is another option. The third, of course, is the hospital setup. Now we have set up quarantine centers, that is for those who are suspected but not tested positive, those who do not have who cannot isolate themselves at their home because the entire family lives in one-room tenement. The second is we've set up the COVID care centers, which basically where people with no risk, without symptoms but tested positive can be located. So that's almost about 28,000 beds across the state. And then we have in every district, we have requisitioned the private medical colleges apart from the district hospitals to set up the district COVID care hospitals. So where people could go, those are equipped with hospital with ICU beds and also with this specialist care.
So just to interrupt you there, would you then say that Andhra will also be heavily dependent on the private medical colleges and hospitals?
No, okay. I mean, Andhra is a mix of private and the public as well. I mean, we have 5 state-level COVID hospitals and all of them are public hospitals. I mean, we've actually exclusively, so those hospitals, we are not treating the non-COVID cases. Now, we have concentrated all the specialists, whether it is anesthetists, pulmonologists, general medicine experts, virologists, all of them are in these 5 state-level COVID centers. So those centers essentially are, I mean, those are the ones which are equipped with the ICU, ventilators. So we have about 3,000 and odd ICU beds now and about 1,700 ventilators, though I do not personally believe that the need for a ventilator would be so high. If I can detect the patient early and treat the person, actually the need to go on a ventilator would be smaller. I mean, this is also a challenge. I mean, as Radhakrishnan mentioned, I mean, how do you reduce the numbers? So the reduction of the numbers really is a separate management altogether. I mean, reduce the deaths is a critical input to the entire pandemic management.
So this is basically our first such conference with, of course, you two gentlemen. In fact, our TNM member, the News Minute member, Varun Santosh, he's the first person to be coming online now to ask a question. Varun, can you go ahead and ask your question? So we have asked a few of the members to send in questions. We've chosen a few questions and they will be asking these to you.
Right. So my first question is to Mrs. Radhakrishnan. We all know, while growing up that Tamil Nadu had a robust public health system in comparison to most other states. So why is it that Tamil Nadu has struggled to contain COVID-19, say in comparison to Andhra or Kerala? And additionally, really glad to hear about the community mobilization efforts from Andhra. Would like to know the implementation challenges and how it's integrated into the Gram Panchayat system. And because the ward committee seems more bureaucratic when I hear about it now.
Mr. Radhakrishnan, there are lots of people. So since you are also pressed for time, we can maybe shorten the answers and questions too.
Okay, first I would like to say is that it's an uncharted territory. It is too early to say that whether we have been able to respond right, because we need to understand that earlier Zika came. Earlier, even Ebola, of course, didn't come to the country. Several times, dengue episodes have been there, swine flu episodes. This peculiarly being a novel virus, and the challenges of, if you look at it, is more focused in urban areas. That was a challenge. Otherwise, the public health system, to be fair, even now, whether it is testing is concerned or treating is concerned, almost 70 to 80% is handled by public health system. What we are actually, needing support with through your, means, I would like to tell is that, biggest challenge in Chennai has been that non-compliance of mask by 10 to 15% of people. These non-medical methods. Unfortunately, as on date, there is no definitive medicine and vaccine. But this non-compliance and another challenge in Tamil Nadu has been, non-compliance of social distancing. So these two has led to rapid spread in, row houses or, urban slums. Despite your best efforts of containment, it does make a challenge. We have now engaged some 93 NGOs. So who can, interact with local influencers to bring about the change. But I would be, even though I have taken over health again after just a month back, it will be too incorrect on us to take a decision just on one pandemic, because otherwise health encompasses IMR, maternal mortality, both non-communicable disease and communicable disease. But definitely it has been actually a challenge not only for Tamil Nadu but the entire world. So let us look at working together with the community, and also NGOs have come up in a big way in the last 1.5 months to actually influence this behavioral change so that numbers can come down.
Mr. Ramesh, he asked you about the Gram Panchayat involvement.
Yeah, I mean, actually, the elections to Gram Panchayats and the municipal corporations have not been held in Andhra. In fact, the COVID interfered, and with the elections, and that's another set of issues altogether. So, in the sense that there are no elected representatives or elected bodies in the villages or in the urban areas.
It must be very difficult now to manage on the Panchayat level.
This has been substituted by this village volunteer and village secretariat and ward secretariat system, which is fairly effective because they are new. They have been in place for, hardly 7 months, and they've been well trained. So there is a lot of enthusiasm at the village and the ward level. In fact, we've been able to contain whatever we've been able to do to a large extent because of these ward and village level secretariats.
Okay, we have one more question. Anna, you want to ask something, or should we go to Dinesh?
We can go to Dinesh and then I can ask.
Yeah, Dinesh, can you please ask your question? I mean, it's a very important question that he has, which I think even me and Anna would like to do a follow-up on. Yeah, Dinesh, please ask.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. My question is on the private hospitals treatment prices front. It's not about the availability of beds, because the Tamil Nadu government has regularized the treatment rates for various parameters like testing and treating. But I have a first-hand example of certain hospitals, which I don't want to name them, in Chennai. They are asking a deposit of about 4 lakhs to 5 lakhs for admitting the patients. So on the regularization front of prices, it has already been done. But how it is being enforced and checked whether the private hospitals are complying to what the government is trying to do? This is my question, sir.
Okay, this is actually
yes, sir.
No, actually Chennai, I think, was the first where I remember one of the news channels did, before this issue came up, they actually did a hidden camera expose, and government also by that time had already set up a committee and they have come up with rates, and I don't deny what he says. See, even now the challenge what we have is around 6,000 beds are vacant in certain hospitals, but there is a demand that people tend to go only to 3 to 4 hospitals. So the best way possible is, one, very easily I can tell, yesterday also in the field I was telling that under Clinical Establishment Act we have to take action on the people, those who are not doing. Second is, we need to also keep people there in the hospital. So that in this particular way, it's very easy to bureaucratically answer that, you can do a Clinical Establishment Act and we can act on them. But down the line, they are facing this problem. This is also coming to our knowledge. The third angle which we are trying to do is trying to do a better helpline. At present, the 104 is only able to convey to them where the hospitals are. But if it can be a facilitating line, that is a work in progress. It will take almost a week, where it can also informally do the booking for these people interested to go to private hospital by doing a live checking of this and also bringing it to their knowledge. It is an area of work, so I will not blanketly deny what he says, because we do get complaints.
But sir, as of now, are you saying there's no system in place where the government ensures that this regularization, the tariff that you all have decided, that it's abided by the hospitals? How are you making sure that the hospitals follow this
No,
tariff?
no. See, the government order is very clear, and government also allows this government order is for walk-in patient who go for this. Then so there are many hospitals empaneled under CM Health Insurance Scheme, for which a different modus operandi is there. That also is available. But the problem which I think the gentleman is trying to mention is a very valid problem. There are 3 to 4 hospitals where people always tend to go and say, I want admission there. There, I think these allegations have been fairly repetitive. And it has come to our knowledge. It is not that there is the government order. If you float, obviously under Clinical Establishment Act, they have to be given notice and action has to be taken. That is one part of it. But going beyond that, like in Delhi, they face what they have done is they have actually every day evening even manually they put up a board, and they have also put up a government officer as a licensed person for the hospital to coordinate, rather than say that, I am doing it at a call center. So the call center again is not complete. It is also, it needs to, like, booking.com, if X is full, tell the individual that the nearest other hospital which is available. It has to be little bit more facilitating type. After verifying that the place which is mentioned as full is actually full by re-verification. It is a slightly complicated thing. Government order is there. We are getting complaints and the DMS is taking action on them. But definitely there is a little bit more work to do.
So basically, Mr. Radhakrishnan is saying that if a hospital is trying to overcharge you, file a complaint, call the helpline, reach out to officers, right? You're also saying that people should actively start complaining also about these things.
Definitely, few complaints have also come to us, definitely.
Okay, Anna?
Yeah, Dr. Amish, Andhra has not capped treatment as far as I'm aware. Is there a plan to cap treatment as far as private healthcare goes for COVID patients?
Okay, let me categorically state this. Actually, we are the first state that recognized the role of the private sector and issued orders way back in 3rd of April specifying the rates for treating patients with COVID by the private hospitals. So they're very specific. This is part of the YSR Arogyashree scheme, which is basically where the private sector provides services to patients who cannot afford to pay. So in addition to that, we've also said there are some unempaneled hospitals. Even there we have specified rates for each of the treatment packages that are required. Now, let me say these two things. One, of course, is I think there's an ethical and moral issue. I think any hospital that exploits a situation of this nature, I think does not deserve to survive as a hospital. And I believe that serious action needs to be taken against those private hospitals who try to monetize an opportunity and exploit people at a difficult time like this, either in terms of misdiagnosis or mistreatment or hypercharging beyond what is authorized. So I think they need to be taken seriously. Those doctors' licenses need to be cancelled. There should be no mercy on these hospitals. They must be shut down under all the legislations that are possible. We are still under national disaster regime. So I don't believe that anyone, I repeat this, should be exploited at a time like this.
Mr. Radhakrishnan, I want to ask the next question before we go to Padma Priya. So there has been much talk about reconciliation, right? First is, there was a report in Times of India by Pushpa Narayan about deaths not being reconciled in Tamil Nadu. What happened to that exercise? There was supposed to be a committee which looked at reconciling deaths. What happened to that committee? We are not still seeing those numbers reflected on the daily list of deaths which are listed. Second is, how are you ensuring that the private hospitals, which are now allowed to test private labs, that all the positive cases that they have are also being reconciled properly, that they're reporting back to the government properly?
Okay. See, this happened probably just before I joined, maybe a week before I joined. But the committee has already looked into these kind of numbers. Earlier, if you look at a whole number, roughly it comes down to 235 deaths, which have been, were part of a positive list, but the hospitals, for reasons best known to them, and the corporation could not reconcile and they did not get recorded. So now the expert committee, actually, which is in its final stages, there are two levels. One is mathematical reconciliation. They have come to a figure of 235 deaths which need to be, which are COVID positive in the line list, plus 21 home deaths. They recovered and went back to home. Okay. Now, the medical experts of them have gone ahead and said that roughly around 49, because it's the final stages, were actually not on account of COVID, but because of a specific particular cause. Now, the ultimate decision which we need to take in the present ICMR and the WHO guidelines says that anybody who is tested as COVID positive, whatever may be the exacerbating reason, even though WHO also says that trauma, if somebody dies in an accident, except that remaining is COVID positive, we need to declare it. So I am sure that in another 1 week, it will reach its finality and we will be adding it up to our overall mortality list.
What is stopping hospitals from actually giving out these numbers? Because I remember...
See, I have checked up with the hospitals when this happened. It perhaps happened in the month of May and all. Those were the times, no, what was happening is as the deaths were happening, the respective, I checked up even in Mumbai and Delhi, because they too have come out with various numbers. Mumbai came with, Maharashtra came with 1,300 numbers. See, the real problem is that they don't want to hide. Ultimately, in the reporting, if a person dies before declared, they have been saying 2 or 3 issues are there. Some cases are brought that then you take a COVID test and the COVID test gets reported late. At that time, the format of reporting and all were not perfect. So there has been misses by hospital. Ultimately, we will be giving notices to the hospital, whether government or private, and also corporation on these issues. Once we get the final report and after we release the reconciling as to why they didn't in the future, such things do not happen. If you look at last few days.
Now, Mr. Radhakrishnan, is it more strict now? Like today, if there's a death happening in a private hospital or let's say a railway hospital in Chennai or any other place in Tamil Nadu, is the reconciliation again going to take a long time, or is there a problem?
No. If you see last few days, yesterday our death would have been 68. The previous day it would have been. The only challenge now which we face from the hospitals is not with regard to declaration of COVID positive. Sometimes what happens is, suppose there are 7 deaths, 4 would be COVID positive, 5 would have come. They would have died even before the COVID test results have come. So those 5 normally, as per the latest Government of India guideline, you have to not keep the body till the COVID test, they are released. So probably a day later or 1 or 2 days later, if out of 5, 3 are COVID positive, they get added. So that is the only level of lack of regulation. There have been occasional slips in 2 private hospitals. They have immediately sent a mail saying that it is we have failed to intimate you, but they have also been suitably warned. So that is not happening. That's why if you look at off late, we would be hovering around 35 to yesterday as high as 68, which also included a few deaths of the previous day, which are all earlier COVID deaths, but confirmed after the death.
Okay, Jinesh has a question. Jinesh.
Yeah, a very good morning to everyone. My question is to Mr. Radhakrishnan. Sir, what are the practical difficulties of having a complete lockdown to specific containment zones in Chennai, like say, for example, Tenampet, Kodambakam, Royapuram, where the number of cases are way higher, where you have a complete lockdown for these specific containment zones, and with the authorities supplying them essentials and not allowing any entry or exit to or from these containment zones. Thank you.
See, I can clarify that the containment, effective containment or smart lockdown is the way to go. Now at present, of course, Chennai is part of an overall lockdown where in the morning time the essentials are allowed. But even in Chennai, the kind of lockdown which you are mentioning happened in B.R. Pillai Street in Triplicane area, where from 88 cases they became 0. Again in Didir Nagar, it became 0. It is not that in Chennai these kinds of lockdown have not been tried. Tomorrow we have a health committee meeting. I am sure this aspect will be deliberated on the way ahead. Because roughly, I want to again tell a lot of people when they look at absolute numbers, even today, Chennai out of 40,000 streets, all these cases so far, including the discharged ones, have come from the latest update is around 9,700 streets. A more effective lockdown of maybe more than 9,000, maybe even 12,000 adjacent streets. If you look at KK Nagar, KK Salai in MGR Nagar, you have maybe a main street plus 20 adjacent cutting streets. If we do that, and the way you have been suggesting has already been tried in Tattangulam area, mini Tirvikanagar, where the cases have come down, we'll definitely keep your suggestion in mind. It is in fact the way Government of India also suggests the lockdown, suggests the containment. Sorry.
Okay.
Dr. Ramesh, I have a two-part question. Firstly, earlier this week, Vijayawada announced lockdown, and then 1 hour later, they withdrew the order. The same thing happened with East Godavari as well. So why the confusion? My second question is, experts say that every time you relax lockdown relaxations, they say the cases will go up. So every time cases go up, do you see a future of we clamping down every time there's a rise in cases?
No, I do not. Of course, what had happened was there was some confusion about who's ordered what. But that's, I think, is less relevant than what the overall strategy is. In our view, or at least in my view.
People are concerned when an order is given and then it's taken back immediately.
No, the feeling is that people are not being compliant, in the sense that people themselves, there's a less discipline than what is required, and then people are not being compliant, and notwithstanding the fact there's been a repeated efforts at educating people and warning them, because people, as I said at the beginning, people have started to believe that living with the coronavirus means living with a pet. You need to do nothing at all and just carry on as life had been. And that's the reason, when there is a particular particular area, as Radhakrishnan was saying, where you have more number of cases, the natural response is to clamp down on that area. And if that keeps expanding, it virtually covers the entire city or the town. So the answer is not really to clamp down the entire area, but how do you really enforce a smart control or containment? And that smart containment really ensures that everybody becomes responsible, so that there is a self quarantine in an area. So we would like to do more micro targeted type of a containment rather than the sort of a all-inclusive omnibus generic containment strategy. So there's a difference. But if things go out of order or control, this is certainly is an option that one should never exclude any option in a situation like this. Every option is on the table, but for the time being, it's a much more a smart containment rather than a generic effort.
Okay. Before we go to Padma Priya, who is a member of the News Minute and a wonderful journalist herself, who has done a lot of important stories on the whole pandemic. Mr. Radhakrishnan, quick question to you. Lot of forwards going around in Chennai and Tamil Nadu. Our Anna herself is worried that there's going to be another 15-day lockdown, another 20-day lockdown.
1 month is the forward.
Another 1 month lockdown. Are you looking at specific area containment as a more probable idea than having a city-wise or district-wise lockdown?
It's my personal opinion, because tomorrow we have a health committee meeting, and in a democracy, Honorable Chief Minister, they have to make a presentation. And let me be very frank, even our WHO Chief Advisor, who is also part of the thing, we also believe, like my senior colleague from Andhra was mentioning, that the way forward will be micro plan and a very smart kind of containment. We can even call it a smart lockdown of select streets where the cases are. Probably a globalized lockdown kind of, entire city kind of thing has its immediate uses. And in Chennai, it was a lot of people who are against lockdown. We need to tell them that, this particular days which we had, we are utilizing it to maximize the test. We were hardly around 3,500 tests were that. It was not just a lockdown which was preventing the movement of people from these risky areas to transmitting it, because they were not coming and testing. So that was the way which is going till 30th. As far as what happens after 30th, my request to all of you would be this, unverified forwards of WhatsApp is not the way for the society to go, because, it is, many times it is incorrect. Sometimes it also puts bureaucrats in a position as if we ourselves have, sent it. I personally feel it will be a very conscious, judicious decision. Like my senior colleague said, I don't think people need to believe these rumors. That doesn't mean that, we need to put everybody at risk. It will be decision depending on the containment zones. Let us wait for Monday. But definitely those were rumors and not authenticated. The health committee has not yet met. It is clearly mentioned the experts have given recommendation. They have not given any recommendation so far. They are meeting on Monday. Next, only one point I want to add to all the viewers who are there is that, we really need to push this non-medical method, which is missing in many areas where there has been this spread of disease to the buffer zone from the containment area. Even in a containment area, sometimes people don't wear masks, they don't wash, they hold the containment place, the perimeter control, they will hold through the hand. There it spreads. And we have also found the public toilets source of spread in the containment areas, and 1 or 2 ATMs are functioning. So we are also doing course correction, but a very smart lockdown, smart containment is what is a way forward as far as my personal opinion goes. But we need to wait in a democracy for Monday. And I can categorically say the WhatsApp forwards are incorrect, and they are not, no such health committee recommendation has been given, or any health committee member has privately aired this view.
I think it would be helpful if you all do use your social media accounts to sometimes bust the kind of messaging this goes on, because there's really no other way. I mean, even if we as journalists put out news stories, people still tend to believe WhatsApp forwards, which I find very surprising. So I would say, please do use your social media accounts more. Padma Priya?
Hi, thank you, Danya, so much. So my question is to Mr. Ramesh. So AP has been boasting of having TrueNat machines across all districts. My question is, have these been utilized for COVID testing? And how has Andhra also been able to scale up testing? And I'm asking this also in comparison with Telangana, where I'm situated. I'm in Hyderabad. And also, has the use of TrueNat machines, if you've used it for COVID testing, impacted the testing of TB?
Okay, I mean, I think that's a good question. I mean, the only way we've been able to ramp up is, number one, of course, is we've increased the number of the RT-PCR centers from what used to be virtually non-existent at the beginning of the lockdown to now 15 of them. In addition, we have now enlisted 3 private hospitals as well, which are ICMR recognized. So effectively, there are 18 laboratories that are recognized for RT-PCR. Second, of course, is the TrueNat machines. They are located at 48 different locations, and there are 240 of them. I think now there are 270 TrueNat machines. These machines was originally set up for tuberculosis. They are for tracing of tuberculous bacillus. So we have now used them for the COVID purposes as a temporary transitory arrangement. This has not impacted the tuberculosis testing per se, because much of the tuberculosis testing happens in the bigger hospitals. In those hospitals, the intensity might have come down for certainly, because the active surveillance of all non-COVID diseases really has come down across the country. And I think across the world really. And I think that is an important issue which personally bothers me. I mean, but that's in a part. I mean, one of the reasons why we've been able to ramp up testing capacity from virtually non-existence to nearly about 25,000 plus is because of the use of TrueNat machines, increased RT-PCR. Third, of course, is also doing the pooling testing, pooling the samples. If you pool 5 samples, then you are really conducting one test, but really testing 5 people. So the cumulative effort is what has resulted in the ramping up of numbers.
You are fine with the reply, Padma Priya? Okay, I think she's. Mr. Radha, question which was sent by Karthik Anand. I want to just read out the question to you. He's asking, how do you define if somebody is critical or non-critical? Is there any sort of SOP given to all hospitals? And what happens when someone who's non-critical later becomes critical?
See, please,
go ahead, Radha.
Sir, you can go ahead, sir. You can go ahead.
I'm actually a doctor from CMC Vellore. So though I'm not practicing for a long time, I mean, in that sense, I continue to be have a keen. I was health secretary for 3 years. That was some time back. So I have some knowledge, and I continue to be of a keen interest in public health in general. So let me answer this question, try to answer, and I'm sure Radhakrishnan will add to me. And this is important. This is important. I think it's an important question you raised. Is that this the histopathology? I mean, the general pathophysiology of this disease is very different from the other diseases. I mean, it's for, and I think it is important for the viewers to know. Number one is no symptoms appear for about 5 to 7 days after infection is contracted. This is very, very different from the other pandemics we have seen, whether it is SARS or MERS or Ebola, where on the day one you are infected, you are seriously sick. Now, so this is one issue. So which basically means I am still infective, but I'm not showing any symptoms at all. The second one is a sizable numbers. I mean, numbers vary from place to place. I mean, almost about 40% have no symptoms at all. I mean, these are the asymptomatic cases who are essentially transmitting viral infections but have no symptoms at all. They are positive, they are shedding virus, they are spreading infection. So this is the other set of people. The third set of people are those who are having mild symptoms. Mild symptoms means just a loss of taste or loss of smell, or sore throat or mild cough and very dry cough, body aches, headache, fever, this sort of a thing, very mild. Now, the 20% of those who really develop the more blown up symptoms. Blown up symptoms are those, really breathlessness, very irritant, incessant cough that don't let you sleep or, keeps you awake at night. So there are a large number of, and then the real indicator is and then we are also seeing cases where patients have no visible disease at all. I mean, no visible stress at all, and yet could deteriorate very fast. And that's why there's been a frequent reference in literature relating to COVID on happy hypoxia. Now, normally when oxygen levels go down and perfusion in the lungs go down, the oxygen goes down and carbon dioxide goes up. And our brain centers, which actually are sensitive, are more sensitive to presence of carbon dioxide in the blood, even by a nanometer, rather than lowering of oxygen levels. So consequently, what's happening in this case is the oxygen level goes up, but the carbon dioxide is not necessarily is going up. So people are unaware of the fact. That's why we see even in hospitals, people are, tweeting or exchanging WhatsApp messages and talking and smiling, and then they're suddenly deteriorating very, very fast. So my advice through you to everyone is that please do not take anything for granted in this disease, particularly those elderly people, those with comorbid conditions, any of those comorbid, hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, any of those serious ailments, please report to hospital. It's very important, the early referral.
Just interrupt. I'm asking a very layman question. I mean, I see Anna also reporting this a lot, but I don't understand most of the health stuff. So it's a very basic question. So many of the deaths that we see, people get admitted within 2 or 3 hours, they die because their oxygen levels have gone down. What should people be careful about? What are the warning signs that we should watch out for?
Okay, I mean, essentially, we have given now to all sub-centers and the PHCs everywhere pulse oximeters to test any person with even mild symptoms, what is the oxygen levels. So one needs to really check the oxygen levels. If the oxygen level is going below 95, it is an indication that there's something going on. And so people must immediately rush to a center. That's the oxygenation is a very early indicator and a sensitive indicator. So you need a pulse oximeter in order to measure your oxygenation. Second, of course, is the breathlessness, but that occurs later. I mean, we are seeing also, as you said, patients come and very quickly collapse, and then it's too late before we could intervene. I mean, there are two things that are happening in this disease again, which is causing death. One is what is called a cytokine storm. I mean, cytokine storm really is the body's response to the virus is being so effusive, in the sense the lymphocytes are flooding into the lungs normally this does not happen. There is usually a small antibody buildup against any viral infection, whereas in this case, there is a sudden flush of lymphocytes into lungs, which is virtually our own body is reacting against the virus. and is smothering the lungs, lungs drowning in our own body fluids, is what is happening. That is one. The second, of course, is the fact that there is hyper perfusion and people are not able to, and there's a coagulation that is taking place in the arteries and the veins that supply that perfuse. So there are two main reasons for death in COVID. One is the cytokine storm, and the second one is the disseminated intravascular coagulation, what they call DIC. And so everything else people have been talking normally. Earlier belief is that normally viral pneumonias predispose to bacterial pneumonia, and it is the bacterial pneumonia that traditionally have killed people from viral infections, and particularly virus that targets the lungs. But in case of coronavirus, in the COVID situation, we have not seen as many bacterial infections. Actually, not seen any, as far as I know, in 100 and odd deaths that have taken place in Andhra. We have not seen any bacterial infection killing people. It is really the cytokine storm, in which case, it's really too late, or it is the disseminated intravascular coagulation, in which case the breathlessness suddenly becomes serious. And so your intubation and also ventilators do not help. I think the Tamil Nadu and CMC Vellore have adopted a sensible protocol for treatment, which in Andhra we are now adopting, which is really treating them with steroids and with low dose anticoagulants. I think these seem to be quite effective from various studies that are shown. And my own belief is that this is the line to go instead of giving hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin and such other antibiotics, which in my view is enough to kill an elephant, let alone a man.
Okay, that will be another discussion, but that's one bureaucrat praising another, which is a good sign. I will go to Mr. Suresh Kannan. We'll wrap this up quickly. We have one last question from Mr. Suresh, and then Anna will wrap up with questions.
Radhakrishnan sir, good morning. You people are heroes and you're doing a very good job. Okay, after spending 25 years outside, I am in Chennai, sir, being an entrepreneur. I feed 150 employees, okay, and around 500 heads to be taken care, sir. My biggest worry is all my 25 years of saving has been put into. So can you give us something that from we are feeding our employees, because it is not their mistake, okay? So we cannot question them, and it is all the poor families, 150 all come from a very poor background, and we feed them. The problem is 3 months we paid them. I don't know from next month what will happen, because I'm in infrastructure industry. So there is a lockdown. Even yesterday I received, as Danya said, that WhatsApp message. Okay, in my heart pumps up. Okay, it's daily we are in deathbed, sir. So hope the lockdown will be lifted, because I strongly feel that the lockdown is not the only question, and I just want to know that lockdown will not be continued. And my second question is, God forbid, if you all are affected, I hope you all will take care, and there is a bed so that we can sleep on that.
No, I can understand your anxiety, and it is a very, very genuine kind of feeling which you have expressed. I am sure this feedback will carry it on to the health committee meeting, which is going to be held tomorrow morning. And again, I want to categorically say that let us not believe WhatsApp messenger. Nothing has been decided, and there has been an increasing view that you need to follow a smart containment and effective containment, maybe a slightly larger containment, with ensuring, like one of the viewers saying, that wherever we have succeeded, we have found we have got people to give things in perimeter, all the consumables. So this is one area where we are working. Of course, in a thing, I cannot preempt a decision and tell what would be the decision tomorrow. So I would definitely convey your concern as a concern of not only you as an individual, but a large section of society which has been facing this tough situation. We'll definitely take it forward. I'll also I actually would like to thank our senior colleague for such a good exposition on the health side of treatment. I'll also add on to all the people that now pulse meter, oximeter is the order of the day. What we find in Chennai is, even in the younger people who came late and died, they were overconfident about their lung capacities. So what we normally do is, immediately on positive, we also do an X-ray and a CT scan. So I would request all of our colleagues to continue not to lose focus on the non-medical methods, because change of behavior in Tamil Nadu is a very crucial thing, because we still are not 100% mask compliant and hand wash compliant, and we don't protect our vulnerable population and stay at a distance. Even in Kasimed, such a huge fish market was built, but people did not do it. But I'll definitely take your concern at the highest level. Thank you.
Anna?
Yeah, so I have a two-part question. I don't know, Danya, if you want to take any more questions. There are some questions.
No, I think we're done with the questions. There's just one before you go to your question. What kind of support is your state getting from the central government? Just to both of you, maybe a quick answer. Does it meet your expectations? What more would you want the central government to do? Or has the center now coolly left it all to the states?
I think if I start off, basically under the DM Act, we have a state disaster response fund. So that had been released. Plus, of course, they have also released, for the migrant labor, some amount from the PM CARES thing. Plus, under the NHM, National Health Mission, they have given funds. This is one area where, we as a country should face it together, not look at what, and at the state government level, I'm sure like my senior colleague from Andhra will do. At present, our chief minister level, their thinking is to now use all the resources available, irrespective of whether they have posed to the prime minister a series of package, a 9,000 crore package, a health package, and all, which will be parallelly, I'm sure, government of India and all will work. But the state's resources have been judiciously utilized, and we have not been stopped from seeking any funds which are absolutely necessary for the cutting edge needs. That has been done, whether it is for health or for any other requirement.
I endorse completely what my colleague had said from Tamil Nadu. This is exactly what the situation is. I think he has eloquently summarized the support that we have received from the center. Of course, I mean, it is never enough. Everyone needs more. There's particularly in times like this, because this is a pandemic that has affected every segment or every facet of our life, our economy, our social dynamics, cultural dynamics, and all that. But let me add one thing, and I think what is important, and this my personal view doesn't necessarily reflect the views of the government of Andhra Pradesh, is that the central government ought to have been more robust in terms of setting standards and strategy for testing, what does it mean, what is the treatment protocol, and more importantly, deaths. Third is the reporting system. Of course, there is certain system that exists now for testing reporting, death reporting. The ICMR does have a portal, but there has to be certain uniformity in terms of collecting information, reporting of information, the preparedness. Of course, I mean, each state is different and each state has a different system. But, I don't believe that, comparing one state with the other makes sense, because the parameters have been very, very different. The way perhaps Mr. Radhakrishnan manages his data is quite different from maybe my other neighboring states manage or I manage. So I think there is a need for standardization and national standards, at least in terms of reporting. Second is mixed messages have been sent by ICMR at different times. I mean, in terms of treatment protocols, in terms of what should be done, what should not be done. I mean, I think those are ad hoc, premature, not necessarily scientifically validated. And I think those have been taken very seriously down the line by the clinicians. And as a non-practicing doctor, I always get very scared when I look at what sometimes happens in the hospitals and what ICMR has been putting out. And I have been a critic, and I continue to be one until, I mean, these are things that need to be set right. As a large country like ours, faced with such a huge challenge, I mean, cannot be tentative in these matters, or cannot be, casual. These are serious issues, the matters of life and death, and we need to take that in that sense.
Okay. That's a good, candid answer, sir.
Thank you.
Anna?
Yeah, so I have a two-part question to both of you. One, there's been a lot of, and there's been a lot of fear and stigma around COVID-19. So are your governments actively trying to address this? My second part of the question is something that we all want to know. Will normalcy ever return, like life before the pandemic? Will that ever happen in the near future, or perhaps, a year or two from now?
I let
Radhakrishnan. Are you all tired? I really want to know, because it's tiring for us as journalists. How tiring is it for the administration? Sometimes I think we don't pause and think how difficult it is for the administration also.
I would like to add one thing is that mental health is a very tough issue at this time, and we all need to understand that even the frontline workers are facing a lot of stress. There is so much of pressure of performance and all, and similarly the patients being stigmatized. We had 2 suicides also. One person running away from the hospital, another man after being positive. So we are actively engaging social workers and counselors to address this. But I would request, through you, the media also should be slightly kind. This is a fight which all of us are facing against the mankind is facing. It's not like, if a state fails or a country fails or a world fails, we can, do an analysis and do this. So we need support in this non-medical method, and we need encouragement of the cutting edge staff in such a large exercise. There are bound to be few mistakes at the grassroots level, or maybe even at a policy level. So there we need to give the concession that it's an uncharted territory. Let us all give them a benefit of doubt so that people can move on. We have to move on, and every day morning we have to look at how many fresh cases, how many got admitted, how many deaths, and how do you tackle the increasing surge. At this time, parallelly trying to explain, concurrent explanation, which quite a lot of you are used to, but the younger group, they find it difficult. The doctor group, they feel stress. The nurse group, they feel stress. So I always tell them that, we'll take the load, but you feel free, work according to your conscience. At the mental health level, it is an issue for people also to realize that corona is one among the many diseases, but it will be very difficult to say that, maybe 6 months hence, like our senior colleague from Andhra was training, we don't know. We can't just say that, next year it will not be there. So we are all, I'm sure, scientific community is working. We will get a good, maybe we crack a combination of drug which puts a reduction in mortality. That will be a solution. Maybe the virus mutates to a lesser version. Let us hope till that, let us all work together.
Mr. Ramesh, your concluding remarks, normalcy, will that come?
Thank you. First and foremost, I think our Chief Minister was the first one who flagged this issue of stigma. Stigmatizing. And this is a serious issue. Actually, it is a serious issue because people don't want to report themselves when they have COVID-like symptoms. And the actual way that we can contain this, apart from the non-pharmaceutical measures like social distancing, masking and others, is really early reporting, is a syndromic approach to management. As early as I report even the mildest of the symptoms, I cannot smell garlic today morning when I wake up, or my toothpaste I cannot taste. Those are very, very early indications of and I must immediately seek out and get myself tested. People are not doing that because there is a huge stigma, and people need to realize, and media needs to play an important role in this, that this is nothing to be, this anyone can get it. This is absolutely secular disease. It doesn't, it makes no difference between young and old, gender, nothing matters to them. So I think that is the important reason that we need to recognize that this disease is not something to be stigmatized about. Unless we do this, and this message goes down the line, people will continue to not report. So the underreporting, not testing is really a lot to do with this particular fact. That is number one. Number two is that I think the people, of course, I'm not tired. I know I'm not actually involved in a day-to-day management. I'm a more a strategic manager. I work with the Chief Minister rather than at the front end. But I want to appeal this through you to not only just to your viewers, but all my colleagues working across the country in different states. And I want to, number one, congratulate them. They're doing a wonderful job. It's really, as you say, it's an exhausting 24/7 grind. But the real brunt is being taken by people who are really at the front end, those who are in the ICU, those who are managing the ventilators, those who are in the villages collecting samples. I think these people are exposing themselves to extraordinary risk, and they're doing a phenomenal job. And I think, and usually IAS officers tend to be in the command control mode. And I appeal to all my colleagues, and I'm not referring to Radhakrishnan, he is a more equanimous person, to be sensitive. And this is not the time to command people. This is the people to a more teamwork, to believe that we are in this together. And I believe this is not a war where you deploy soldiers to fight. This is really a low intensity insurgency where you don't see the insurgent. The offensive strategy does not work. You need to be really defensive and strengthen your defenses. So it's very different from fighting a war. We are used to a war strategy. This is really, in my view, is a long drawn insurgency in which you don't see the insurgent. So I think that is the terrain where we are. So I really appeal, and to summarize and to lastly, is that the governments can do 25% of the task in controlling and containing them. That is, build up the testing capacity, build up the tracing, tracking, treating. But 25% the media need to play a role, educating, informing, not alarming, not scaring people, but at the same time, really, how do we take this information to each and every corner of the country? And the third, of course, 50% vests with the individuals and the communities, the families and the societies. They need to take ownership, they need to be informed, they need to not, and particularly these days I'm seeing everyone is saying that there's a medication. Hydroxychloroquine works, and then Ramdev Baba has come up with something, and now some other pharmaceutical comes up with Remdesivir. Let me be very upfront and honest. There is no cure to this disease. There is no cure. The virus cannot be cured. It can slow down the multiplication. Now, many states are using the drugs which are used for controlling HIV/AIDS. HIV is a chronic disease. It protracted disease, and then so that virus multiplication I can slow down. Here is a virus which multiplies very slowly. 14 days it's gone. So none of the claims that are being made by whether it is Siddha, Unani, Ayurveda, Allopathy, homeopathy, there is no curative medicine. Only thing is prevent getting infected, number one. If I get infected, get myself tested, isolate myself. If I have symptoms, comorbid, get admitted. Doctors must really treat, is a supportive treatment. If I have fever, give me paracetamol. If I have respiratory distress, give me oxygen and give me those medications which I mentioned earlier is the way to go. So overall, we do not know what the future holds for us. All we know is that this is a long, low intensity insurgency. That's all I believe. That, you need to be prepared. Don't exhaust yourself. Take a break once in a while, read something. Mental health is critical. Many people are stressed out of this, and both those who are in the game and those who are outside. So I think the preserving one's sanity, health is critical in my view. And have more of these conversations, read something. So that's what I would like to say.
Though you said with a smile, it's an ominous message. Preserve your sanity and health. It's going to be a long haul. Thank you very much, both of you. This is actually the first interaction we are having. We launched the News Minute membership just a month ago. This is to make people subscribe to the News Minute. We still are a free platform, but we don't want to have the economic issues which everybody else is facing. This is the first interaction. In fact, Anna and me are television journalists. We are feeling a bit strange not to be shouting, at the participants, because that's what we are normally used to. It was good to have a sane, insightful conversation. Thank you very much for joining us. Thanks.
And thank you very much for having us. I need to thank all of you and yourself, Danya, and your colleagues for really launching this platform. Congratulations. I really admire, and this is much required. Keep it up, and from our side, we will support you in whatever way. Thank you so much. And
thank you.
Thanks, sir, and thanks, Danya, and the entire team. And it was very, very useful. In fact, to be very honest, from his CMC Vellore background, it was a very good learning experience also. And we will keep in touch with you, sir, and we'll all work together to ensure that we are able to fight this disease. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks
sir.
all
Thank you.
to the members.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. All the best. Thank you.